Welcome to CommercialDrones.fm, the podcast that explores the commercial drone industry, the people who power it, and the concepts that drive it. I'm your host, Ian Smith. Hey there, and thanks for tuning in. Today I'm bringing you a relatively new type of episode in which me, your host, is actually not the host, but the guest on the other side of the mic, answering questions and providing my thoughts and outlook on the drone industry. I did do this recently in the past for episode number 73, where I was a guest on Udacity's podcast, The Drawing Board, and syndicated it here on Commercial Drones FM. But this episode is being syndicated from a podcast that is actually much more dear to my heart. Around 4 months ago, I was a guest on Randy Goers' podcast, The Drone Radio Show, which some of you may know. We recorded an episode about my perspectives on the commercial drone industry, which is what you're about to hear. But that wasn't the first time I was on the Drone Radio Show. See, Randy was a heavy inspiration for me to start up my own podcast, the one you're listening to, which is over 2 years old now. But prior to me starting this show, those 2 years ago, I was a guest for the first time on Randy's show. So I'm very proud to share today's episode with you, featuring me revisiting the Drone Radio Show after a couple-year hiatus and checking in with Randy on my latest opinions, thoughts, and what's changed in the drone industry since 2016. And in order to respect the integrity of Randy's show, I'll be airing advertisements from our own Commercial Drones FM partners, FLIR and Deveron UAS, at the very end of this episode. So please check out the Drone Radio Show on your podcast app of choice and visit their website at droneradioshow.com.
You're listening to the Drone Radio Show podcast, the show about drones and the people who use them for business, fun, and research. Hosted by Randy Goers.
Hello, everyone. This is Randy Goers, and welcome to the Drone Radio Show podcast, episode 154. How has the drone industry changed? For that question, we turn to Ian Smith, Business Development Lead at Drone Deploy, and founder, CEO, and host of the successful Commercial Drone FM podcast. I interviewed Ian more than 2 years ago as we talked about finding ROI through drone services. Now, a lot has changed in the drone industry since we talked, and I thought it would be interesting to get an update from Ian. So in this episode, Ian talks about Drone Deploy's current products and services, how the drone industry has changed in the past 2 years, and he shares what it's been like producing his incredibly successful podcast on the drone industry. But before we hear from Ian, I want to thank those of you who have been supporting the podcast on Patreon. For as little as $1 per month, you can help defray the cost of production and keep the podcast going and growing. Go to patreon.com/drone radio show to join the team. Now let's take a look back at the drone industry with Ian Smith of Drone Deploy and the Commercial Drone FM podcast. Let's pick up the interview where I ask Ian to introduce himself.
My name is Ian Smith. I work at Drone Deploy and I host a podcast about drones called Commercial Drones FM.
Ian, a lot of people know and use the services provided by Drone Deploy, but for those who may not be familiar with the company, can you tell us about it?
Drone Deploy is a software company in the purest sense of the word. We create software, so mobile apps and browser-based software on desktops and laptops that actually will allow the automation for data collection from a drone, so from a DJI drone, since we build off the DJI SDK, to automatically fly the drone and collect a bunch of data in the form of images of whatever it may be below the drone. So whether it's a field of corn for agriculture, or a construction site, or maybe even for professional land surveying, mining, forestry, pretty much anything. It's a building, maybe residential or commercial. You can, capture that data with Drone Deploy in an automated way using our mobile apps, and then upload that data kind of for the second piece of the puzzle and get it processed with our photogrammetric algorithms. And your outputs are, we call them maps to simplify it, but it's basically getting these high-resolution orthomosaics, digital surface models, point clouds, and 3D models, along with plant health of whatever your subject was on the ground. And so once that's all processed and complete, then it's stored in the cloud and you can view it, you can, share it with folks, and then you can kind of augment that data with some of our partners and our key integrations to get even more value from it. So my explanation is a little verbose. It's a lot simpler than it actually sounds in the end from a user's perspective.
How simple is it? What do users actually need to know if they want to put their drone in the air and make an agricultural map, for example?
Well, skipping all the regulatory parts of it, the actual practical things you need to do are just really, have a fairly recent DJI drone, charge up the battery and turn it on, and then have a smartphone or an iPad, so Android phone or an Apple iOS device, and download the Drone Deploy app and start that up. So you got your drone started, you've got your mobile device running Drone Deploy, you go ahead and then you can plan a flight. And it's super simple. You just kind of draw a box or a polygon around the area that you want to create a map from. And then you just press a button when you're ready, and the drone will take off exactly where it's sitting, then fly a kind of like a lawnmower pattern, depending on the mission type. And it'll capture all that imagery automatically, and it'll come back and land exactly where it took off from. And so, in 99% of all the cases of drone deploy flights, the user does not even need to touch the joysticks at all. So it's really creating a way for consistent, repeatable imagery capture and flying much better than any human pilot that I know can fly, and getting all that data for you. And so when it comes down to it, it's just turning a couple things on, pressing a couple of buttons, and then your drone flies, captures the imagery, and lands. And then all you have to do is upload that imagery in Drone Deploy, and that's it. So that's really all it takes. I mean, in the most simple terms, it's just a few steps. And a lot of people are just incredibly surprised at how easy it is. Even a lot of the new hires that come on at Drone Deploy that aren't from the drone industry, they start in, and one of their first tasks in their first week is to fly a drone deploy mission, tell us how it went, provide any suggestions if they have any, and describe the experience. And yeah, lots of surprise and big smiles on how easy it is.
Now, it wasn't always that simple based on our conversation of maybe 18 months ago. But in your view, how has Drone Deploy products changed?
Yeah, so if you look back a little further than that, I think it was about 2 years ago since we talked. And if you look back a little further than that, 3 years ago, we had produced a piece of hardware called the Copilot that actually had an LTE modem inside of it that was sending data while the drone was in flight, crunching it into our pipeline via the 4G LTE cell network. So now today, yeah, Drone Deploy is significantly evolved. We have something called Live Map today. It's one of our new features. And it's really impressive because nobody else is actually doing this yet. I suspect some folks will be, working towards something similar. But while the drone is in flight, so I mentioned earlier the step where the drone is flying itself and taking a bunch of images, we're actually doing something new, and it's called Live Map, and it's actually taking the FPV stream, so that live video feed that the drone's camera is seeing as a preview. It's actually using, some on-device, so on an iOS device, if you had a compatible iOS device, it's using the on-device, basically processors and capabilities combined with Drone Deploy photogrammetric algorithms, and it's doing some really complex calculations, but it's drawing a map preview in real time as the drone is flying and covering its little lawnmower pattern above the area. So it's almost like you're taking, if you imagine like a white wall and you're painting it, I don't know, Drone Deploy blue color, and you have a paint roller, it's almost like, if you were rolling that paint roller in a lawnmower pattern all the way around the wall, it's kind of doing like that kind of action where the map is really appearing as the drone is flying right behind the drone. And so you can see it happening, and it's really interesting for different industries. Obviously, search and rescue, fire, anything that's like really timely, in essence, public services. These kind of industries are really finding utility in this. But also construction and agriculture, they want to know that the imagery they're capturing is good. And so they can get that map preview while the drone's still in the air before it lands to see how everything is going. And that's just Live Map. That's one of the new features. But in the time since we last talked, we also have launched the project that I actually lead. It's called the App Market. this is our way of creating an ecosystem. And so we launched this in November of 2016, and we have 75 integrations. So we launched with 14 integrations November 2016, and today we're up to 75. And these are different integrations. They're ways that third-party technology partners have augmented the drone deploy interface for our users. And it can be something as simple as, AirMap have integrated. They have an integration. And so previously, when you planned a drone deploy flight, unless you were aware of the airspace in the area that you're planning your flight, then, you weren't really sure if that was a legal flight, so to speak, or if you weren't going to be encroaching on any controlled airspace. So now with the free AirMap integration that you can just add to your drone deploy account for free, it'll actually ping AirMap's API and tell you if you're planning a flight in a restricted flight area to not fly there, that it's not going to be okay. And then it can go as complex as one of our partners is called Agrimo. And if you are an agricultural user and you have been, mapping fields of corn or soybeans or even orchards, then you can go ahead and use their computer vision and machine learning algorithms that are super specific to agriculture. And you can get all kinds of different insights by just pressing a button. And then their servers automatically will analyze all of your imagery, and it'll spit back a report like stand count. So telling you how many plants are actually standing based on what you were expecting from how many seeds you planted per acre and such. And so there's a bunch of different ways. There's 75 integrations, as I mentioned, and it's growing very quickly. Lots of different ways that you can use the app market. And so that's kind of our strategy is we're going to focus and continue to focus on what we do best, which is drone software and, operating the drone and doing photogrammetry. But we want to partner with best in breed solutions to give you the very verticalized, very specific results and outputs and things like that you need. And other things that have changed, we've added, more computer vision ourselves with automated ground control points. So if you use ground control points in your operation for mapping, then you have a much easier, kind of a more automated workflow than you previously would on any other software, where the center of the ground target is identified and almost automatically nailed right from the bat. And then, of course, the buzzword these days in the drone industry for drone software is enterprise. So we have a lot of enterprise features that we've released, like user roles, permissions, audit logs, and different types of APIs. So much has changed. I just made like a brief bulleted list in order to try to hit the most important parts. But if you tried drone deploy 2 years ago or 18 months ago and you go in today, it's going to be almost a totally different experience. It's just improved so much, and the product is just so much more deep these days.
Well, I think it just illustrates how quickly a company like Drone Deploy and others have just really matured into delivering really sophisticated tools and services.
Absolutely, yeah. And this stuff, is you just nailed it. I mean, it's very sophisticated, but explaining it sounds a lot more involved than it really is. I mean, a lot of the stuff that I mentioned, the sophistication of using computer vision and machine learning to automatically identify the center of a ground target out of, hundreds or thousands of images is pretty complex. But the way that we're presenting it to the user is trying to be, in the most elegant manner to really just save time and get the most value out of these drones and the data that they're collecting and producing as you can.
Are there certain industries that have taken advantage of the software and the tools more than others?
So we're seeing incredible growth in construction. Our first industry that we ever focused on was agriculture. That's just something that we identified as an area that we can make a big difference. There's huge volumes of data that can be collected there. And there was, a lot of passionate agricultural users that were early adopters of drones and that started using Drone Deploy. And so agriculture being like a legacy industry that we've been involved in, we've seen huge gains there. But as far as what's growing the quickest from a Drone Deploy perspective and from my perspective, it's definitely construction. I mean, if you think of the average construction site size, there can be some massive ones like a stadium or an Apple campus. But if you imagine how much a small quadcopter, like a Phantom 4, those things can fly for, a conservative, 25 minutes at one time, and they can cover a lot of acres. And so the size of a construction site is perfectly suited for a quadcopter you can buy for $1,000 on Amazon and have at your door in 2 days. but then also the level and the quality of the data that they get. There's an immediate ROI there that you don't really see without lots of interpretation and kind of proprietary knowledge like in agriculture, where you really have to interpret that and, know the history of the field and the weather events that occurred last year and the time you planted and the crop you planted if you're rotating crops. So, construction is just a lot more immediate ROI. You get aerial view of your site. It's high res. You know what's happening immediately. You can share that. Everyone in the org can kind of see, and you can identify issues very quickly, very easily. So construction has kind of latched on to drones. I talk to folks fairly often, and they really agree. I mean, they think that every construction company is going to have a large fleet of drones out there doing their thing. And another industry that we've really started to focus on with automated roof reports is really just like the roofing industry in general, and in some ways the insurance industry. Previously, before pre-drones, a lot of folks were climbing on top of residential or commercial roofs to do all these manual measurements. And so they're paying a ton of insurance costs because there's high risk there. And they need to capture these measurements in order to develop an accurate quote or order the correct amount of materials to redo a roof or fix a specific problem. And so now with drones and Drone Deploy, you can get these automated roof reports for $35 a pop. You just do an automated drone flight with your drone, capture the data, upload it into Drone Deploy, and then with one extra click, then you can get a full roof report, which actually, it's got it's very sophisticated machine learning going on there, analyzing the point cloud, extracting measurements, checking out slopes and different aspects of the roof. But then it just spits out a really easy PDF report, a DXF file that you can import into other pieces of software. And the level of accuracy on it is like actually kind of ridiculous because it goes to the 10th, where the roofing industry is a little overwhelmed with that in some cases because they don't ever go down to the 10th in their measurements. So these are just, a few of the industries, of course, but construction being the fastest growing, and then roofing is up and coming. I think they've seen the light, as it were.
Now, Drone Deploy isn't the only company that delivers services like you've described. Is the market such that there's a lot of room for everyone to expand, or are companies starting to bump up against each other trying to compete for the same customers?
There's definitely bumping up against each other. Yeah. If you look at the Drone Deploy competitors out there, you can see a lot of overlap in some areas on what they're focusing on. One of the things where we don't see as much overlap for Drone Deploy is definitely in agriculture. SkyLogic, Colin Snow, drone analyst, his company did some research studies and surveys and everything. And he concluded that in agriculture, at least, we were checking out the numbers, of course, because as a company, we're interested in this, that Drone Deploy actually has the majority market share for agricultural drone software in the United States. So that's something that we know that we're kind of in the lead on, according to this and what we thought. And, it's a data point. It's just one data point, but it's one that we feel pretty confident in. But yeah, definitely for roofing, for construction, there's other companies out there doing the same thing. We're starting to get a little bit more vertically focused. So focusing in on these industries, what are some really high value features that we can deploy and create for them in order to maximize the value they get from Drone Deploy and differentiate us. But I would say that the biggest differentiator with any of these between Drone Deploy and any other potential Drone Deploy competitor is the ecosystem we've created with the app market and the APIs. With the integrations that are there, there's integrations from every single vertical, and they're best in class. And so that's something that we don't have to focus on building ourselves. Are confident that the technology partner that's integrated can go ahead and, leverage their expertise to create, the best agricultural software or construction ERP software and project management software so that we don't have to actually build that into the product ourselves. We just focus on opening up the platform and making it easier for them to integrate. So yeah, there's definitely some overlap and some bumping in. But that's just the sign of this growing industry that we're in.
The topic of the podcast interview that we did last time had to do with finding your ROI. And if you remember, at that time, we were still trying to define what ROI was and documenting it. How easy is it today to talk about ROI?
That's a really good question. So it's so easy today that I don't even think about it anymore. That was one of the key points that we were trying to prove early on when I was running marketing at Drone Deploy. Is our first strategy was like, all right, look, we know there's value here. We want these industries to adopt drones, but we have to give them some hard figures and hard numbers. And so we were doing these in-depth case studies with our customers and our users from around the world in these different industries. We still do them today. But hitting the ground running with some of those first metrics, we were just trying to figure out like, okay, what is the metric here? What do they want to save? Does a farmer want to actually increase their yield, or do they want to decrease their inputs? Well, both of those either make them money or save them money. So now we have case studies at Drone Deploy, and we've seen people that are actually doing both. They're increasing yield and decreasing input. So it's really just about enhancing the operation. And these days, there's case studies are almost a dime a dozen now, which is great. So it's becoming more and more real. You're seeing, the early adopters that grabbed drones and were really kind of like shaking them kind of crazily at their colleagues at whatever company they were in, telling them that these were going to be pretty big for their business, are now scaling their operations out. And we're seeing, customers at Drone Deploy with 30, 50 more drones than they know what to do with. And they're actually getting, there's a line item now. It's like drone budget for these companies. And 2 years ago, there was no such thing. Yeah, it's becoming a lot more of a no-brainer for businesses. And it's just been a joy to see the hard work from the entire industry, the entire drone industry, making that happen and helping the proliferation of the technology spread.
For Drone Deploy, what sort of challenges does the company foresee in terms of staying competitive and keeping up with the market?
More people. I mean, we're always hiring. We need more people. We've got there's so many leads out there. I mean, I'm speaking for pretty much every drone company when I say that, but it's really a function of a lot of companies still haven't done their first drone pilot program. So we're really helping them to kind of acquire and deploy this drone, and the data that it produces and integrate it into their systems is essential. And so what we've been doing are creating partnerships with companies so that instead of just selling, I mentioned earlier, vehemently that we are just a software company, but we actually sell a full solution, and we can offer this full solution to a new company that comes to us. So if you come to us and, if you're listening to this and you're interested in getting into drones with your business, then, you have a lot of concerns. They could be legal concerns, training concerns. What do I do with this data? How do I integrate it into my systems? So the app market ecosystem can help with a lot of that. But then we've partnered with companies like Dart Drones, who will actually come to your office, train your staff to use drones to be compliant, to get a Part 107 certificate and learn about airspace and aerodynamics and things like that. And then, we also are going to be announcing some partnerships with ways that you can be more compliant with insurance and insuring your operation properly to minimize the risk that you might be posing, and other types of ways. Like maybe you don't have any interest in training 10 employees to be drone pilots. That's totally fine. I mean, you don't have to do that. There's ways that you can tap into a network and dispatch a drone pilot to go somewhere to grab that data and then deliver it to you. So you just get a notification and then you click on it, and then there you have it. You've got your map or whatever that final data product may be. So we'll be working on these different partnerships and, announcing these throughout this coming year to really kind of enable that full solution sale.
You've been in the industry now for several years. Based on that, what insights or advice would you offer to commercial drone operators in today's environment?
It's been 5 years. It's definitely changed a lot, but something that really hasn't changed for me is just specializing in what you're good at. I've got folks that still contact me, hey, I'm starting a drone service company. What should I do? I want to do agriculture or something like that. I've got a lot of farmers that live next to me. I live in a rural area or something. And the first thing I say is like, are you a farmer? If you're not, and you don't have any intention to be, then just stop what you're doing right away, because you really have to provide that full service. Agriculture is very difficult. If you have a great relationship with an agronomist or someone, or, the grower knows exactly what to do with that data, and they're fine with you just going out there, flying, collecting, and then delivering without any other further analysis, then that's great. But really specializing in a specific niche can be great for your business, and not just like the SEO value that it'll give you in search engines and such, but just the level of professionalism and the value you can provide your customers from your specialized experience is worth its weight in gold. So if you're not interested in doing farming, then go out to a construction site maybe and pitch those folks, because the ROI is just so much more tangible and immediately apparent in that industry. So specialization to me is just, a key to this. Become an expert in the industry that you want to provide drone services for. That's, of course, one of the things that we do at Drone Deploy. We want to specialize just in the drone software and the photogrammetry and delivering it and making it really easy, rather than the very specific things that I was mentioning earlier, which we've opened up APIs for technology partners to do. And then the other piece of advice, of course, is always be learning. Always know what the latest news is. Keep tuning into the Drone Radio Show. Check out the interviews that are coming out from other people in the drone industry, learning about what Lance is and the UAS integration pilot program. And, if you want to have another really big competitive advantage is getting certain waivers. Sometimes, it can be difficult to fly in certain airspace. Still to this day, it can be, if you can get a beyond visual line of sight waiver or a flying operating at night or over people, those things can really set you apart and be a super strategic advantage whenever folks are looking for someone to operate a specific kind of mission and no one else being able to. And obviously, that's easier said than done. You're not just going to go apply for all these night waivers. But, if you can, and if you have the capabilities of doing it, then that can be kind of a little hidden advantage you can uncover yourself.
Is there anything about Drone Deploy or the products that we should talk about that we haven't?
There's quite a bit to update you on in 2 years, but I think I hit most of the big points there. If you want to know the latest that Drone Deploy is releasing, you can hit up blog.dronedeploy.com and check that out. That's where we throw out all the case studies that we're doing. That's where we release new features, new reports. We've got ebooks, we've got webinars, we've got an annual event that we've been doing now for a couple of years. We'll have our third annual Drone Deploy Day event later on this year. So yeah, lots of stuff. We keep busy. So rather than just fill it with Drone Deploy propaganda, you can check out that blog and check out what's going on.
So let's talk about your podcast, which I think you do an excellent job and highly recommend it to others. It's called the Commercial Drones FM Podcast. Now give us some background on why you started it.
So, believe it or not, the reason why I started it was because I was a guest on your podcast, Randy, those 2 years ago. And I wanted to do something a little focused, very specifically focused on just like the business part of drones, and being kind of strategically located here in San Francisco in the Bay Area. It's been fairly, I won't say easy, but it's given me access to a lot of companies with, kind of being able to do these face-to-face interviews that I don't think I could get anywhere else. And so I saw an opportunity there. Today it's at about 70 episodes, Commercial Drones FM. So I'll be releasing episode 69 here soon. But yeah, seeing thousands of downloads on each episode. I've got this quarterly review series that I originally started. So it's called the Drone Industry Review. I release it at the end of every quarter. So Q1 2018's version is coming up soon and will be released since Q1 just ended. It's crazy. It was very info-packed and newsworthy drone industry quarter. I would say even more so than Q4 2017. But I started that little kind of series. It's like a special series rather than the traditional interviews that I do to actually keep myself up to date with the drone industry. So whether it's like interesting jobs that are coming out for drones to mergers and acquisitions, funding announcements, like shakeup, weird drama that's happened in the industry, I release those every quarter. And I realized, I was keeping track of it so diligently that I could make an episode out of that. So I did. And that's what I do every quarter now. But yeah, I'm learning a ton through these interviews. You can commiserate here with this is, when you talk to these people and interview them, it's just an amazing opportunity to learn.
I 100% agree with you. I've learned so much from talking to my guests. It's really been rewarding. For yourself, what do you enjoy most about doing the podcast?
I think it's just the connecting with these people on the other end. Like, I don't have as much fun recording my solo episodes, like my drone industry review, to be honest, than I do, meeting someone new, like you said, and like hearing their story. Like, why did you start this company? Or, what do you do and why do you do it? How do you find these tools useful? and where do you see the technology going? I mean, that connection is, it's like the most fundamental piece of this. And it's like this fringe benefit, but that's also so intrinsic to just the nature of the podcast that we both do about the drone industry, where we're trying to broadcast and help this person tell their story and share that with the world. That's like hands down just the most beneficial part of this and the thing that I enjoy the most about it, for sure.
Is there one or two interviews that really stand out in your mind where you learned something unique or you just really had a great connection with the guest?
Totally, yeah. So with almost 70 episodes now, it's really hard to choose, but I'll just go from some of the latest ones. I mean, there's been some great episodes, early on and in the middle here, but one recent one that I was very pleasantly surprised on, and I told him after the show, I was like, you know what, this was a really good episode. I really appreciate your candor, your honesty, and sharing these lessons learned. And that was with Michael Cohen of Industrial Skyworks out of Canada. They're a software company specializing in drone inspections. And that was episode 67. Michael came on and he just, was super honest. He shared just a ton of lessons learned and, admitting like, hey, look, we weren't always providing the optimal experience for our customers. He called it the just drone problem. So if you just have a drone and you take pictures with it and you deliver those to a customer, you're literally delivering them a headache. They delivered like thousands of images one time for a roof inspection. And the customer was like, this is absolutely terrible. Like, I can't do anything with this. But that kind of made this light bulb switch in his head and say, look, there needs to be some software here that actually makes this easier for the customer. And so hearing from him and learning about those like eureka moments earlier on in the phase of their company was amazing. And being able to share that was a really cool experience. So I love that episode. One that's kind of unique actually was the episode immediately following that. That was the most recent episode, number 68. That's where I recently upgraded my gear and I got more than just one other person on the show with me. So it was myself with DJI, with FLIR, and then with Slant Range to announce the recent DJI Payload SDK and FLIR XT2 sensor announcements. And so that was really cool. It's 4 people on one podcast and there was like a great round table that happened. And the final one, I did jot down these notes. This is why I'm rattling them off so effortlessly. The final one is actually one that I recorded recently that's unreleased as of today. It's with Skydio. It's with their CEO, Adam Bree, who is an extremely brilliant engineer out of MIT and used to work at Google X and started Skydio, which is the fully autonomous drone company, which to me is the most promising American drone company that I've seen that I can remember. Their technology is pretty incredible, and learning about it and their design inspiration and their thoughts on the industry was eye-opening. And it was like a breath of fresh air, amongst everything else that's happening in the industry right now. So those are 3 of my favorites. You'll have to stay tuned for the Skydio episode, though.
One thing that I find very fascinating about your path is that you started as one of the industry professionals. Then you branched out into podcasting and expanded that to include the role of analyst or researcher. Then a few months ago, you hosted a live forum that brought together local experts to talk about drones and services. How did that event go?
Yeah, I had the inaugural Commercial Drones FM kind of meetup event. It was amazing. I was kind of stressing out over it. You always want, like, if you're going to host an event, you want people to show up. So when I did it, I was like, all right, I had a number in my mind on how many attendees that I wanted to have, not RSVPs, but attendees actually showing up. And so I organized the panel with Romeo Dersher from DJI, with Jesse Mooberry from A-Cubed, Airbus's not venture arm, but Silicon Valley arm that they're doing a bunch of neat projects in. She works at Althoscope. And also John O'Millan, who's the co-founder of Drone Deploy. And so I got a little panel together and I had about 100 people actually showed up. It was pretty cool. I had the event hosted at a cool venue in SF and we just chatted about the drone industry. I wanted to make sure that folks that were totally new to drones had something to learn there, but also some of the veterans that did show up and support the meetup were there. So hopefully there's another meetup coming in the near future. I would say that the biggest disappointment from that meetup was that my audio setup did not work. So I was supposed to be releasing that panel from the meetup itself as its standalone episode, but unfortunately the audio fell through. So maybe in the second meetup, everyone that wasn't able to attend can kind of tune in and see what these events are all about. So hopefully I'll do one maybe this quarter.
That was such a great idea. And to have that kind of reception, great job.
It was flattering. Yeah, totally.
So if you could step back a few thousand feet, how would you describe how the industry has changed?
Well, the last few years, really have been rife with just some growing pains with the industry as far as the commercial side goes. I mean, that's what I focus on. That's my bread and butter here. The recreational side is just chugging along. Drones are getting better. People are buying them more. They're getting cheaper. Cameras are getting better, et cetera. From the commercial side, I mean, it's been, battling against perception, proving the value of drones, but moving towards more automation and more kind of embedded technology so that, drones aren't just kind of gathering data, but they're helping to actually diagnose the problem. And my kind of outlook on the future of drones is where they're not going to just be capturing the data, looking at it, diagnosing the problem. They're actually going to go there and they're going to fix the problem. So if it's in a field, they're going to go spray the specific areas and do spot applications. Or if there's, maybe a damaged screw or something, or a bolt or a nut on some type of infrastructure or utility, then the drone's going to fly around it automatically. It's going to capture that data. It's going to say, oh, that looks loose. And then it's going to go switch its little robo arm to a screwdriver or something like that. And it's going to go up and it's going to tighten that bolt. It's going to fix it, or it's going to, go up and apply some type of paint that will stop the corrosion or something like that. I mean, that's like where a lot of people's perspective and expectations of drones, they expect them to be at. But, it's been like working through gradually over the past couple of years to get to this point. And so, I see a lot of focus on cameras. But right now, like every drone, basically, it's a remote sensing device. It just has to have a camera on it. Part of this is regulatory, part of this is technological advancements, but I'm a little tired of cameras. I talked about this on one of the recent episodes. Like, drones are just taking pictures of stuff. Like, what about if they can affect the physical world more? And with those scenario that I described there, where it's like fixing something, but also moving things around and delivery. But one of the most precious pieces of cargo of them all are humans. And so, some stuff that really interests me there are like the electric VTOL aircraft. So like the flying taxis or flying cars, and the companies that are working on those, like Bahana, Airbus Bahana, Kitty Hawk, Bell Helicopter, Uber, all these companies are working on their kind of version of that. And I think that's, the future of the industry. When all this other stuff gets automated, we're going to be just moving people around, and it's going to be, very, very efficient.
And what's this whole experience been like for you personally?
So working in the industry, yeah, it's been a dream of mine since early 2013. Since I kind of made a promise to myself to make this a career, and seeing it grow, like I had a gut feeling. I was like, okay, this industry is probably going to be big for commercial operations. There was a lot of speculation at that point. I think the AUVSI report had just kind of come out, the now infamous AUVSI market potential report that's always still referenced but hasn't been updated, where they were saying all these billions of dollars are going to be in all these industries and surrounding drone use. And so seeing that, not necessarily seeing those numbers be met, because there's a lot of controversy around them, but seeing the crazy growth and like the fulfillment of the prophecy of drones coming true has been super incredible. It's been an amazing ride, and to play a part in it, just any role that I have and made any type of difference, I can't even describe it in words.
Has anything surprised you?
DJI's dominance has not surprised me. What has surprised me is the fact that nobody has identified that an SDK, a software development kit that you can open up on your drone hardware platform that you create as an OEM, can actually create a vibrant ecosystem around your products and create even more value than just you can trying to make the best drone you can possibly make. And so nobody has really done this. Nobody has taken a cue from DJI and said, maybe we should open up an SDK and try to get a developer ecosystem who can, augment our platform with great software onto it. And so, I mean, I can just go down the list, like
nobody's really done this. And if they have, there's been not a lot of investment in it. There's Parrot, SenseFly, 3DR, GoPro, Unique, Delaire, Aerialtronics, Autel Robotics, Skycatch, Tespri. You name the drone company that produces hardware, and there's not a big ecosystem. There's not a platform built around it. DJI is like the only one who's really, truly identified that opportunity and just taken it and just run with it. And now there are literally multi-million-dollar Silicon Valley venture-funded companies that are built upon DJI's SDK. And so what surprises me most, Randy, is that nobody else is even attempting to do this. So that's my big surprise in the drone industry, because everyone notices that DJI is so dominant. But that's a key reason, is there's companies built on their coattails, for lack of a better term. So if any other companies want to start going into SDK, I'm sure we'll start seeing that soon. But having that firsthand experience, seeing what the effect is on the drone deploy ecosystem with the app market and our APIs and 75 integrations, has just made that just mind-blowingly apparent.
Well, maybe the model used by DJI and Drone Deploy might spark some interest by other companies.
Yeah. And there's a couple that have, jobs out there for similar, platform and SDK and API stuff. But the big drone hardware manufacturers, the OEMs, I think a lot of them missed an opportunity there. And so they're paying for it. Some of the companies I just rattled off aren't even making drones to this day. So we'll see what happens.
And for my final question, Ian, what message would you like to leave listeners about what Drone Deploy is doing and the opportunities in the future?
The message that I'd like to leave is just keep tracking what's going on. I mean, there's so much news coming out. There's great drone blogs that are releasing, any press release that they get their hands on. There's SUAS News, of course. There's Drone Life. Those are two probably the most popular ones. Twitter is actually a huge place for drone news, so keep abreast of that. But as far as Drone Deploy goes, I mean, we're going to keep doing what we're doing. And I just wanted to mention that, being a guest on your show a couple of years ago is what inspired me to start my own podcast, Commercial Drones FM. So naturally, I am a very proud drone radio show Patreon supporter. So keep doing what you're doing, Randy. And yeah, of course. No, I appreciate it. So thanks a bunch for all the help that you've given me so far.
That's it for episode 154 of the Drone Radio Show. I hope you enjoyed hearing from Ian Smith of Drone Deploy and the Commercial Drones FM podcast. I want to thank Ian for taking the time to speak with me. If you want to learn more about Drone Deploy and their products, check out their webpage at dronedeploy.com. If you want more information on the Commercial Drones FM podcast, or you want to connect with Ian, go to commercialdrones.fm. And please check out Ian's podcast for some great information on the commercial drone industry. If you like the Drone Radio Show, please consider supporting the podcast with a small donation. The content is always free, but for as little as $1 per month, you can help defray the cost of production. To donate, go to patreon.com/Drone Radio Show. And thanks for listening. Your support means a lot to me, and I hope you'll listen to more episodes of the Drone Radio Show podcast to hear how others are using drones for business, fun, and research. For the Drone Radio Show, I'm Randy Goers.
This has been the Drone Radio Show podcast. More information on today's show can be found on our website at www.droneradioshow.com. If you're using drone technology for business, fun, or research and would like to share your experience on the show, please visit our website and fill out a guest appearance application. And don't forget to follow us on your favorite social media channels.
This episode of Commercial Drones FM is brought to you by FLIR. Pretty much everyone in the commercial drone world knows about FLIR's thermal imaging technologies and may even have a basic understanding of how their sensors work. At Commercial Drones FM, we think this technology is deserving of the spotlight to reveal some of the incredible things thermal imaging drones can accomplish. Drones equipped with thermal imagers offer a way to see the world from a different perspective, which can help identify infrastructure problems, locate missing people, and increase safety and efficiency across a variety of industries. The value of thermal imaging for commercial drone operations is undeniable. So I want to use this podcast as a platform to dive deep into the world of heat and seek out the best practices and the unique use cases that make thermal imaging sensors the most drone-ready payload for commercial drone applications right next to RGB cameras. So join us over the coming months as we invite FLIR and their customers into our studio to discuss the technical and practical uses of their groundbreaking efforts in aerial thermal imagery. This episode of Commercial Drones FM is brought to you by Deveron UAS. Deveron UAS offers enterprise drone services for farmland across North America. I recently spoke with Bonduelle, one of Deveron's largest customers.
So my name is Jennifer Thompson. I work for Bonduelle America's Long Life. We're a vegetable processor. Bonduelle is a very large company with 54 plants in the world. Here in North America, we have 11 plants doing frozen and canned vegetables.
So naturally, I wanted to know, how is Deveron helping one of the largest vegetable processors in the world by using drone technology?
So we use Deveron to service and support our precision agricultural needs. For us, it's not easy to have our own or fly our own drones to gather crop data. So Deveron is ready and available to work for us when needed. We fly thousands of acres, and managing those acres, it just works very easily with them in our fast-paced growing season. They're not just providing data, they're helping to solve issues and find solutions.
Well, that's very important work, but what's your favorite crop to eat?
My favorite crop to eat is sweet corn. I will eat sweet corn 365 days of the year.
I'm not sure if I've ever eaten sweet corn yet that was monitored by drone. To learn more, visit deveronuas.com/dronesfm and see for yourself how Deveron is leading collaboration in agriculture with drones. That's deveronuas.com/dronesfm.